Cammie, and we are going live with Miss Anny Havland. And this is all going to be about cutting the clutter and how do we cut the clutter out of our lives. And I have been putting together a team of experts who I've thought were the best in their field, local to our area, and could offer the wisest advice to our readers and listeners everywhere who are tuning in right now. And Anny is the creator of Talk It Up TV, a positive nonprofit who is bringing positive social change and social media to all of us on her platform. So everybody, welcome Anny. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for joining me. You know, I was through the interwebs of social media. I have been connected with you and following you for quite some time now. And we've never connected in person, but I've always felt your personality is very kindred to mine. So I'm very excited for our interview today.
Hey, we're connecting now.
Right? We figured it out.
Yeah.
So there's so much that I want to talk to you about, but first of all, you have a very beautiful, humbling story. And vulnerability has been a really hot topic in cutting the clutter and allowing people to be open to change. And something that I think relates to what you're doing with Talk It Up TV is that you're changing and shaking up the negative impressions that we're all getting from media and what is out there. And so can you talk to us a little bit about that and the mental clutter that's associated with that?
Oh, that's actually a really good point, and I haven't had someone describe it that way, but you're right on, Cammie. So when you are putting items, I would say, into your mind, whether you're watching things, reading things, listening, seeing things, it starts to clutter your mind. And unfortunately, a lot of the media today is cluttered with negativity. And there's only so much space that our brains can carry and hold. And it's hard to pick and choose what you allow into your mindset. So with Talk It Up TV, I try to teach people and show people that positivity is so much more healthy in all kinds of lifestyles. And when you choose to watch the news, you're left with feeling like someone just robbed a bank, someone just died, someone, just hurt another human being, and you are intaking so much negativity that it leaves you with fear, and you're left with fear. And when you have that, it starts to clutter your thoughts. And so throughout your thought process, you start to think more negative, you start to think more fearful, you don't maybe do the things that you would normally do, you're not always smiling as much, you're just overall maybe not as much of a happy person, and it affects your choices. That's the one thing it really does, it affects your choices and the decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis, whether you understand it or realize it's happening or not. So when you allow that to go into your mind, and those thoughts will be created based on allowing that in. So it's important to be careful with what you allow into your mind, because it can get cluttered and there might not be room for all the positivity or the things that you really do need to be focusing on.
Absolutely. It's a huge, huge point that I actually make in the book, and how I created my business was I was watching the Oprah Winfrey show, because
love her.
She's my queen. And so I would get home and I would have what I called my hour of power. And at the time, she was doing the whole Live Your Best Life series. And I had never had that come into my life before. I knew nothing about self-awareness, positivity. I had no knowledge base of this at all. And it changed my life simply from watching a positive program. So what you're doing and what you're putting into the world, I mean, it's affecting people in ways you have no idea, but it is true. The mental clutter that is associated with that, and the ads and all these different messages that you don't know that you're internalizing or consuming, and what effects that has. So thank you for bringing such a beautiful program to the world.
Oh, you're welcome. And I really do appreciate your gratitude.
And I want to talk about, I was watching one of your interviews and I just, I fall in love with people very easily. And you talked about how you had grown up in a fifth wheel with your family. And you touched on some certain points that were very vulnerable and very humbling. And you also, throughout that story, at one point said, I just sold everything, and that curated Talk It Up TV. So you were willing to let go of everything physical in your life because you saw the bigger picture. So tell me a little bit about how you place any attachments on your physical items, or do you always keep your eye on the prize?
That was definitely a hard time in my life, and a lot of moments where I had to open my eyes and see what was really important and listen to my heart. Growing up without having anything always made you feel the desire to want things. But I've always been less is more. But I was confused with material things. And so going to school, not having new school clothes, or having difficult time buying books, not being able to do the activities that my friends were able to do or drive the cars, it really made me motivated to work very hard for those things, right? And they were all materialistic things. And from going to, I didn't know what I was going to eat for lunch that day, to I never wanted to have to feel that ever again. I didn't want to have to go into a grocery store and sit and compare prices because I didn't know how much money I was going to have to buy the next meal. I wanted to get to myself to a point in my life where I could just go in. If I wanted something, I could accumulate that. And then it got to a point where I was so overly motivated with that, I started building an empire underneath me, and it kept growing and growing to a point where I realized, when is enough enough? And is that what really truly defines success and meaning and purpose? And I did an episode with a little girl. At that time, she was only 9 years old. Her name is Maddie. And I remember being able to take my connections to try to help her. She has these horrible teeth. It was hard for her to smile. It was hard for her to eat certain foods. But at that time, her jaw was just not developed enough. She was just too young. And it was devastating to not be able to help her at that time. But I do remember what it made me feel like inside. And I know exactly the moment when I discovered my passion and my purpose in life. And I remember going home to all of my things, and it actually made me feel guilty for the first time. Guilty for not understanding what that all had meant. Even though I'd worked so terribly hard for it, it wasn't the true meaning of love and humanity. And when I went home and I looked up at my tall ceilings in this beautiful home that I had built, I realized none of it was worth it. Not that it wasn't worth it, but it didn't have the meaning that I thought it was going to bring. It didn't bring me the happiness. And so what it made me feel in my heart to know that I could help this little girl and it would completely change her life opened up everything for me. And I knew that if I could just give her this one gift, what would it be like if I could give that gift or other gifts that were people that were in need of things that I had accumulated? So I remember sitting there, having that moment, crying to myself, and I just looked around and thought, that can go, that can go. And eventually what I did is I sold my house, the one I built. I sold my investment properties. I sold my business. I sold literally everything that I had and turned it all into cash. And I moved down to Seattle, and I started giving it back to people that needed it more than I did, because I know that I have the intelligence, the street smarts to recreate what I need to survive. I have survival skills that I've learned through my life. but not everybody has those skills. And so what I realized is that my number one skill, though, is people, working with people and giving the gift of dreams and helping them. And so I realized decluttering everything in my life that I'd ever worked for was actually the best thing I've ever done. And I started giving away my money so much that I got to a point my own mother was like, Annie, if you give it all away, you're going to be homeless. And then how are you going to help the homeless if you are homeless? I'm like, very, very true. So I turned the show into a nonprofit so other people can get involved that believe in the mission. And we help people who have fallen through the cracks of society, because here in the US, we have a lot of amazing programs, right? Like we have programs set up for homeless, for vets, for, all kinds of situations, but, which is a big but in the system, people fall through the cracks of those programs. Not very many other countries come in to help people here in the US. We go outside to help other people in different countries because we're the US. We're supposed to be strong and powerful, but unfortunately, we're not as strong and as powerful as we once were. And there's a lot of tragedies that happen here as well. So I want to help my sisters and my brothers and my neighbors that fall, to lend them a hand and maybe to hold a hand next to me as well, to help me to reach out my hand. So if I fall, then we kind of become a chain to help everyone through those problems and just to show people love. And there's just so much hate out there right now. It's heartbreaking. But I realized giving that all up, which some people think I'm crazy, they're like, how much money did you make? It's like, how many people have I helped now? More like it. That's more rewarding to me personally, but sometimes it takes trials and tribulations and to have to actually exhale some of those things to get to where you're really supposed to be in life. And I'm one of them that I feel very blessed, because not everybody gets to live a life and know what their mission is in life. And I know what my mission is, and I'm on the path to that.
And I think, and maybe you can advocate for this as well, that true success, or finding what is of value most to you and your soul, is complete trial and error.
Yes.
Or, people always, especially on social media, want to boast their successes, but they're not necessarily boasting their failures, right? And part of entrepreneurship is just the ability to get back up quickly. Mm-hmm. Because it's not a matter of if or when you're going to fail, or if and when you're going to get knocked down. It's about how you bounce up quickly. And I think for people that are really struggling with clutter, it's because they're trying to fill that void, like you said. They're trying to get to that next step. They think that by acquisition of items, they feel comforted by that.
That's true.
So, I know nothing of you. I can only speak to what I'm feeling from you, and what I have felt from you in this talk and in similar interviews is faith. And how can you speak on that a little bit through your work, and in terms of what you have seen working with other people? Because everyone has an issue, whether it's mental clutter, physical clutter, spiritual clutter even. So how has faith really helped in that process of navigating a true north?
Being able to really listen. When you have faith, you need to know that there's hope involved, that there's a direction for you, that you're worth it, that you can do whatever you want, that you're powerful, that you're loved, and you have to believe. Part of having faith is just believing, and whatever your faith is, it can be any type of faith, but it's the power to believe that there is something out there for you. Which is difficult for many to talk about. Some people don't like to talk about that, but I always can tell, like, people always ask me, like, well, how do you come up with your stories, or how do you find these people? Because if you watch the show Talk It Up TV, you'll realize each candidate is probably hands down one of the most amazing people ever. I mean, these people are undescribable. And what I do is I listen. So this little kid taught me this really cool trick. We wanted to do a show one time about how to not judge from your exterior, to look within your soul and to eliminate judgment. And this little child who was burned from head to toe, you couldn't see but his eyes. I don't know what he used to look like. You couldn't tell, he was that burned. And he said, Miss Annie, I have something to share with your viewers, and it will be life-changing, and I know how you can stop judgment. And he said, everybody has a story. And instead of judging and assuming, which could be the devil, all you have to do is one simple thing. So what's that? He said, ask. If you ask, most people are willing to share their story. And so what I do is I just ask. And whatever topic it is that we're focusing on, I ask. And then that's where my faith comes in. Because I don't know if it's going to be the right person. I don't know if it's going to be the right answer. I sometimes live moment by moment when we're going to film, or if we have a candidate. I don't know sometimes what the acts of kindness is going to be. It literally will hit my heart like bricks. Sometimes I can't sleep. Sometimes it's all I can think about is that individual. I can't, I obsess over it. I think everything about them. How can I help? What can I do? What, and that's when I know, is when I stop and I listen to those signs and those signals that I'm being given. Like recently, suicide has been hitting everywhere, and it keeps hitting me hard. Very close friends around, hitting all over in the news. It's hitting near and dear. And it's as if I ignore that, well, then I'm not believing in my faith. I'm not listening. But I'm listening, and every moment I choose not to listen, it hits again. It hits again. So I know without question, I'm being asked right now to do something regards to suicide prevention. Something is being told in my heart that I have to express to individuals that it's okay to be vulnerable. Because when you break down the reasons of suicide, and there's a lot of them. I mean, it's things like being bullied, it's depression, it's finances, it's hidden illnesses, but a lot of those are stereotyped. So I feel I keep getting these signs that I need to do something to break down those stereotypes. Because what happens is, like you're saying kind of earlier in the show, not a lot of people talk about those moments because it's not perfect. It's not, are they going to get judged? What are people going to think? You know what? I suffer from massive anxiety. I've personally had anxiety so bad, I've gone into a seizure before. I have. And most people might not look at me and think, oh, she stands on stage, she speaks to people, she's in front of a camera. There's no way, she's got all the confidence. I wish I could be like her. But in reality is when I choose to be vulnerable, and I choose to talk about it, and I open that up, it allows others to do the same. And then we realize once that starts to happen, we're all a lot more like each other than we think. And these abnormalities that we assume are abnormalities are actually pretty darn normal. That actually most people go through those hardships. Most people go through some of those sufferings. And the people that are being bullied, they're not just little kids. They're people in the workforce. They're adults. They're seniors. People that have hidden illnesses. They're not just senior citizens. They're little kids. There's kids with cancer. There's kids with all kinds of stuff. So with faith, I have to stop and listen. And I have to know myself well enough to know when I can feel it here. And I always know those moments, and they're hard to explain sometimes to people. But once you start practicing it, you'll know. You'll feel it.
Absolutely. Faith is something that can, in my mind, be felt. It can be heard. if you're listening, but really it's a feeling. And you know, I've had my business now for 10 years, and people always ask me, like, how do you keep doing what you do? Or how do you work with these people? And, you know, and some days it is totally nuts and totally just bananas. And the people sometimes are cuckoo cuckoo. But what I always find is a really dear friend of mine, Erica, she runs SteriClean. She does like hoarding. She was on the show Hoarders, and a beautiful quote that I got from an interview with her was that we're all just suffering. Every human being has survival instincts. We're all suffering. We're all just trying to navigate through that. So how can we better have compassion? How can we better learn? And as I'm writing my book, just the other night, like I was trying to, you know, finish up the manuscript and all these things. And the two things that kept coming up were really personal stories that I wouldn't think off the top of my head, but faith kept coming through in my book. And you literally walk into somebody's home blind and say, how can I help? I know the tactics from how to get you from 0 to 100. And what steps you need to take, but do I know you? Can I connect with your heart and your family? And so it's such a vulnerable, intimate conversation. And I think your topic on suicide prevention will really hit a lot of homes. I know that I've personally been involved in or near the death with Chris Cornell and Chester, oddly enough, and I was never thrown into that world before, but through a client of mine, I was able to understand all these beautiful and tragic facets to it, but there is beauty to it. There is connection to it. And I know that you're always looking to serve that positive message. And I think vulnerability and faith is really at the heart of these things. And I know that, Annie, you are a mother as well, and rolling into faith and clutter, how do you kind of challenge your, is it your son or your daughter?
Son.
Your son.
My little mini-me boy.
How are you raising him in terms of what kind of emotion he is to hold in possessions, or do you have that conversation with him at all?
I do. And one thing that we really focus on is working through our emotions. Don't yell in our house. I tried it one time because I saw another mother do it. And I thought, oh, if I yell at him and tell him to get to his room, then he's going to behave, right? And he laughed at me. He said, Mom, I said, what? He goes, that's so not you. I'm like, yeah, I know. And he's like, should we sit down and talk about it? I'm like, yeah, we probably should. So we use our words, and it's hard when you're young because you're learning your emotions. You don't always recognize them. So we do our best in our house to talk through those things. When we're feeling angry or sad, we talk through it. And it's not always going to be easy, but it's working. And we also don't watch much TV unless it's like movies or talkative TV in our house. He's not allowed to watch the news. He lives a fearless life because of it.
So most people would hear that and say, well, you don't have TV in this day and age. What do you do with your kids? And you're saying, well, we have conversation. And a lot of households I go to, they're literally full of distraction and toys, and it's do this. So how do you get away from that approach with your son?
My whole thing is about creating memories. So versus maybe sitting in front of a TV all day, right now, this is kind of fun, but we are crocheting together blankets. Yeah. So we're doing that.
How would you would that?
Right? Hey, it was actually his idea.
Oh, that's
and so we sit together and we have moments where we're crocheting blankets, and it's great. We just sit there and we chat and talk, and we lay in bed and we do it, and It's wonderful, but we try to find things, though, that we can create memories, because he's never going to remember back to that one toy I bought him, but he's always going to remember back to that one day we went indoor surfing, or, you know, we went, like, one of his favorite things is we like to go play tourist. It's so fun playing tourist in your own city. Like, everyone should try it no matter where you live, because you just don't always do that because you live there. But it's so fun just to go around, and I try to make him come out of his comfort zones too. Like when we're walking down the streets, I'm like, all right, we're going to skip. We're going to go have some fun. We're going to skip the whole way up that hill, and we're going to laugh, and it doesn't matter what anyone thinks about us because we're laughing and we're having fun. So we try to get out there. We try to do different things, but my thing that I'm just really am very passionate about is communication and making memories. To me, that's very important. So it's relationships in life. And I'm so proud of him because he's grown up watching everything that I do. He actually has watched every single Talk It Up TV episode that there is. And he lives by that like that's a normal life. Even since he's been, 4, he will go and like give his blankets to homeless. Just last week, he saw a guy hungry outside of Taco Bell, and he looked down and he goes, he doesn't have any food. I go, it doesn't look like it. And he went and asked him if he was hungry, and he gave him his dinner. And that was just normal to him. So I teach him those things as well, but he's a pretty cool kid.
Well, you're a pretty cool mom. And, I was raised by a single mom and single women, and the most influential people in my life have been really strong women. And I think that just being honest about who you are, even if you're stumbling, even if you're not doing things perfect, you're still getting out there. And one thing a quote that we use in the book is that you're collecting moments and not things. And that really is at the heart of the issue, is creating these moments, because at the end of your life, I remember my grandpa passing away, and he was quite the character. So we'll just put that out there. But, I remember the last conversation that I had with him. He's like, you got a lot of shit to deal with when I go. And I'm like, yeah, I do. Thank you for that. Like,
work on that decluttering there.
But it's not about that. Like, he could have cared less about it because, his last words to me were, I love you, baby girl. Go home. Go home. And home is a place where we've created our life and our memories. And at the moment of his passing, our home here at the farm was cluttered, and there was a lot of unmade decisions, but it was about the memories that we had here, because clutter can always be cleared up. So Anny, my closing question for you is, for people that are watching or tuning in, listening, what piece of advice would you give to them for if they want to cut the clutter out of their life and live with less? What advice would you give to them?
Organize your life, for one. I think that's really important, is to prioritize and know what's really important to you. If you haven't touched something for a while, it's like, what's the point? What's the point of having it? For me, I live so much better with simplicity. It reduces my stress levels, my anxiety. It helps me not to feel claustrophobic when there's too much stuff around. I prefer to have one nice quality thing that's going to last a lifetime than a whole bunch of little things that are going to break. But challenge yourself. What is really important, but what's important to you? Because what's important to you is different than what's important to me. And things are just things. They don't mean anything. They break. They can be replaced. But what can't be replaced is relationships and people. Memories can never be taken from you. Life experiences. And once you learn that, you can really live a happy life. And it can help eliminate a lot of stress. So that's some of my advice.
I love it. It's perfect advice. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in, and thank you, Anny, for joining us. And if you want to learn more about how to cut the clutter out of your life, you can go to organizingexperts.com and also check out Anny and the beautiful work she is doing at talkituptv.com. Thanks so much, Anny.
Thank you for having me. Bye. Good night.